Hey there, my name's Colette Gunim, and this is Rooted in Love, a podcast where we dive deep into conversations with spiritual and social justice servant leaders who are dedicated to cultivate a world truly rooted in love. Join us as we intertwine powerful insights and visionary ideas that inspire us to reimagine what it would look like to truly be in radical, loving community together. Thank you for joining us to expand your mind and open your heart towards our collective liberation. This is Rooted in Love. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Rooted in Love with Coco Sanctuary. And today we have a very special guest, someone who has been my mentor and coach in the past, and that I'm so honored to have on the podcast today, Solunis Nicole Bay. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really, really honored to be here.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm just so excited because I've really been so inspired by Solunis and, that level of both that grounding centeredness that I feel from you so deeply while also staying soft and in flow. And that I've just been so inspired by your work and the way that you show up in the world and really wanting to have others learn from your own journey and your own path of coming into your own inner liberation and what you do to be of service to so many, including myself, through your work too. So Solunis is a somatic coach, a DEIB professional, a change maker, a strategist, and a convener of visionaries, and is doing so much for the collective, and very excited to dive in more about everything that you're doing and for us to learn from your practices. So if we could go ahead and start with an intro question about what are the practices that allow you to stay rooted in love, as the podcast is really about this being rooted in that, and what helps you to do that?
Oh, what a really wonderful question. I didn't expect that to be the very first one, but I love it. To stay rooted in love really is about being around people who are an embodiment of love themselves. The practices we can do for ourselves, that's about deepening our self-love, which can be everything from your meditation practice to that workout at the gym, to the foods that feel really nourishing to your body and bring that kind of aliveness. But you also need to be in community with others that allows you to see a reflection of yourself and what love looks and feels like when it's embodied around connection.
Ooh, Solunis. Oh, thank you so much. I feel like that was needed to be heard because I feel like oftentimes it's very easy to just go into our silos, and that's like, oh yeah, I can stay in my love bubble here. This is a safe bubble to be in. And I don't really want to be the world. And yet that is actually the way, if when we build bridges to actually coming into intimacy and love and what real love is. So important. And choosing who those people are intentionally.
That's, I think, the work, right? Is once you get to that place of understanding all of your spaces of grace and brilliance and challenges and still loving yourself, and then being able to be in connection with another reflection of that, is something that we don't get to practice as often in modern age. We might be in our professional lives, in our meetings, or going about our lives creating things in the world. But when you get the moment to just slow down, the balance between connecting with nature and connecting with other life is a way to understand what love actually is as a muscle and not just as a theory.
Gosh. Love as a muscle and not just as a theory that we can practice to grow in. That's beautiful. Gosh, thank you. Thank you, Solunis. That's really, really, really powerful. All right. So maybe we can just dive into your own journey. And if you're open to sharing a little bit about your own background, where you grew up, and then starting to maybe go more deeper into like your own inner journey of how you've done your inner work to come into that place of love within yourself.
So I'm from Brooklyn, New York, born in the 70s. So I know for some of the people listening, like, oh, she's really old. Yes and no, right? My parents split when I was young. And so my sister and I moved down south with my mother's mother. So I spent about 7 or so years of my childhood between Natchez, Mississippi, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Dallas, Texas. So real Southern exposure, which is a different like community environment than Brooklyn, New York. If you know anything about Fort Greene, I mean, I pick up Fort Greene because that's where I'm from. Think of like maybe a scaled down version of what the Cosby neighborhood looked like. That was my Brooklyn neighborhood, and then my Southern childhood experiences were in a 3 bedroom house with a garden. Those are the kinds of communities that formulated my childhood. While that may seem really picturesque, I had my own struggles there. A family that was split very early. There was a lot of abuse in the household. There was abuse in my childhood household from my grandmother to me. I had to take my parents to court around their parental rights and eventually got custody transferred to my father's mother. So I had a very rocky childhood and came out as bisexual as a teenager, which also destabilized my housing situation because my parents were, though they were activists
Mm.
inside of the Black community, the idea of having a bisexual daughter was not it was against their religion. My childhood life was like, if the church is saying I'm wrong, then there's something wrong with the church. There must be a faith. There must be a way of understanding divinity, or in other words, God's love that isn't bound by what you're saying because something just doesn't quite gel.
Thank you for sharing so openly about, that inner journey. And of course, I feel like it's the people who have gone through like the rock bottom, the most suffering that share the most light with the world. And I felt it. I was like, I think Solunis has gone through it to be able to get where she is
Mm-hmm.
now. So thank you for sharing. And yeah, I guess like as a follow-up, what do you feel propelled you from that level of trauma and really, really hard, difficult situations to come into a space of actually I don't want to live my life in that sense of victim. What was that journey for you?
As a young girl, I did believe in something bigger than myself.
Mm.
You're raised with like this idea that God will take care of you or take care of it. And I was deeply faithful as a young kid. At one point, even at the age of 14, I thought I was going to become a nun. I was like, I'm going to devote myself to a church. And I also loved mythology. It wasn't that it was unread. I loved the big stories. I read Joseph Campbell's work, and then I had a real in-depth passion for psychology. And I know all those things are just hallmarks of anyone who's going through a traumatic period of time where you're trying to unpack, why is this happening in my life? What can be done about it? Where is safety? How do I get rescued? All those things are happening in real time. Most psychologists would say you go one or two ways, right? You run towards it or you run away from it. And so for me, it was like, I want to understand how to make this better. I want better for myself. The stories that I'm reading about this big universe provide some kind of solve for my heart and for my soul. So how do I have more of that in my actual life? Is really what moved me through. And then, you go to college, you begin to like dive into more study.
Yeah.
And sociology was my major. So it was looking at it from a systematic way.
And that's the thing that when you start to realize that it's not just an individual thing of like, oh, my parents were that way for a reason that was much larger than even they knew why they had
Mm-hmm.
either like, yeah, things of abuse or those kinds of side effects and symptoms of a much larger systemic injustice.
Systemic issues. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
May I follow up? Like, so you
Yeah.
started to go more into faith, and that's sort of like your anchoring for some time of being able to have that seeker for like deeper meaning.
I questioned faith.
Got it. Mm.
Like, I had more questions about religion. I stopped identifying as Christian very early.
Okay.
But I still had a felt sense of something larger than myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that had been rooted very, very early in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So in that curiosity or space of being agnostic, like what is God, who is God, like where are all these things, you begin to like read different versions of religious texts, or at least that was my
Yes.
journey. Not just the modern versions, but also the historical ones, which only fed more of my love of myth, right? It's like, oh, these people believe this. Let's look at why and how and how it served them. And in that, my heart would get bigger in the spaces of fantasy. The world can look different if we believe different.
Mm.
And my thoughts around beliefs started to get clearer. What's the foundation of that? Why is that the belief that you have? And the more I got curious about that for myself, the more I got clarity of ushering some of my own healing.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, this is really resonating because I feel like I'm currently at that stage of just reading a lot of different spiritual texts. For me, I definitely believe in a creator and I definitely feel like a divine presence in my life. And yet
Mm-hmm.
the idea of like choosing a one specific path to go down is very difficult
Mm-hmm.
because I see so many beautiful truths in so many different paths, but then
Mm-hmm.
I see some not great things in some texts too. And so I'm wondering for you, like, did you end up choosing a specific path? What is your relationship to the divine
Mm-hmm.
now?
For moments, there would be a particular faith that would call me. So, like Yoruba called me for a good while,
Mm.
and I met with Babalos, which are like godparents, and I interviewed. I did all of the stuff to like become an initiate, and every time they were like, "This isn't the path for you."
Wow. Mm.
Right? I actually had one godmother say to me, one Babala, "You don't need this rigor. You're already called." And while that felt like somehow validating, it also felt like rejection. Where do I belong?
Yeah.
But I don't have a community
Yeah.
rooted here. It's like, well, I can still study. Going back to the mental space, it's like if my heart can't belong here, then maybe my mind
Wow.
can. So I spent a number of years studying the Yoruba faith, but looking at it from an academic
Mm.
lens, how it shows up in all of the places where you have the African migration or the slave trade has touched a country, and you'll see a
Mm.
different version, a space of refuge or empowerment
Mhm.
or liberation. That felt like there were a number of people who were kind of circling. And in that I had a larger community to chat with. That led me to reading things like Conversations with God and Sacred Woman by Queen Afua. You find your tribe, but
Yeah.
it was in the indirect way. Whenever I've stepped into something that had a cultural lineage, I wanted to understand the lineage
Mm.
of it
Mhm.
as I was practicing. Is there one spiritual path? I don't think I have one. I feel like I'm informed by like maybe several.
Okay.
And so there
Yes.
are there are some places that I feel more at home in. If you think of Agape or Michael Beckwith, they talk about Christ, but they talk about it as Christ consciousness. They talk about Buddha, but they also talk about Buddha consciousness. So it isn't necessarily locked into the dogma as much as it is like, here are some of the principles or
Okay.
the lessons.
I feel like I can really resonate with this because I'm like not sure which path to choose on my end. And it's like maybe if I already feel that connection to God or spirit, do you have to choose a specific path? I also see the other side of it where sort of like going to school when you are mastering on something or like getting a PhD on a certain path that you can go so
Mm-hmm.
much deeper in something versus dabbling on the surface. And that's where my fear is that like, oh, maybe I need to go into just one and just choose one and then dive in and that's the way towards deepening
Mm-hmm.
spirituality. I don't know, like have you thought about that too? And have you felt that in your own
Mm-hmm.
exploration?
So I did think about going to seminary school. What's held me back most of the time is that I didn't want to deepen into just one path. I enjoy the untold stories, the things that are not just positioned by like, oh, these are deemed okay by the church and these are not, or here's what we say and we ignore these. An example would be Mary Magdalene. Her story was the one as the redeemed poor, the one who washes his Jesus' feet with her hair and anoints his feet with oil with her hair. Well, now that the church has deemed her the apostle's apostle, more of her stories come out. But well before that, it had already been diving into like, where's the demonization of this woman and why is it showing up in this way? So I got curious, and before things are starting to like come out now from the church about her narrative arc, I had already learned three Marys in the Bible and not the conflating. I had already read about her looking at Christ consciousness through the body, and that's her book. But that doesn't help when you're trying to control people. There's something to be learned from the untold stories. And so, if there were a discipline or a school that allows for me to do that in different lineages of faith, which is something I'm already do, then that would interest me.
Okay, okay. Yes. Yeah, I've actually started reading the New Testament too, and it's really, really incredible because I never read about Jesus before and like actually learned
Mhm.
for myself, you know, the really powerful, again, I don't want to say myth, but like the stories that can directly
Mhm.
relate for us to learn from what's going on currently in this present day and age that yeah, it feels hard to just choose one when there's also so much we can learn from so many different paths. So, wow,
Absolutely.
wow.
And we also don't talk a lot about the stories of Muhammad,
Yeah.
right? Or how that relates to Judaism or Christianity. And all of them underneath the helm of like Abrahamic stories, right? These like they're this is a huge umbrella where millions of people have devoted themselves in
Mhm.
terms of faith. It's like how do we not see the similarities of and the evolution, and I do look at it as an evolutionary arc of the Abrahamic tales. But it also is like, it's like that's one way of seeing divine.
I guess this ties into my next question, which is now going into the space of like your own justice work and liberation work for others. And if you're open to sharing a bit about your own path on that trajectory too, and like working in the DI space and like strategic management for nonprofits and how you went into coaching.
My father was a Black Panther. My mother was a Southern debutante. They did the Freedom Bus tours. I grew up listening to my father talk about his conversations with his father, who was from his time in Haiti. He was born in Barbados, but moved to Haiti as a young person. But their concerns about Haiti with Papa Doc and Baby Doc, that sort of consciousness was inside of my household, like drinking water. I don't think I could have made any other choice, especially as a young person, other than to understand multiculturalism. My parents did send my sister and I to all Black private schools. They wanted us to have a huge sense of what it meant to what Black identity means and not to have it as an impoverished identity. Once I joined an organization called the National Council for Unity, it was really about bringing people of different ethnicities together,
Mhm.
and the work was inside of the school systems in New York. Its founder, Robert DeSena, was a mentor of mine. And though I don't believe in all the things that Bob does, it did inform my early justice work and my early collective work. So when I went to work for places like the United Nations, working on the Millennium Development Goals, which are now the SDGs. Like it came with this understanding that all life and all ethnicities have a right to be. And so the idea of looking at Western influence inside of other spaces or the global North's impact on the global South was an interesting intersection when you're looking at policies, but also coming from like, there is something to be learned from the global South that the global North has not yet adopted. And when you're actually looking at water points and education and setting up banking systems, right? Looking at justice work, what could be justice work or could be extraction work. So it really depends on who the players are and then what's at play in terms of power. So I spent a number of years doing that before starting to do some work domestically, which was around the farm bill. So like how does food get to the table? But my job was to humanizing the farmers who oftentimes didn't look like me, but were using techniques used from enslaved people who look like me and talk about land grants, institutions where they learn these things or things passed down by generations, and talking about poverty over generations. Also going inside of I wouldn't even just say the inner cities, but communities where food was not easily accessed, where we're talking to folks who needed SNAP benefits in order to feed their children. And then to bring that up to like legislation.
Incredible work. And I'm sure, again, like this whole thing of like identities and like being okay on sides, what are the sides that we're on, and having to work in that kind of space. I'm sure it was not easy to like have to reflect on your own self of like, yeah, what are my values and what do I believe in when I'm entering these
Mm-hmm.
spaces too, that yeah, maybe necessarily we wouldn't feel welcome in for whatever reason. So I'm
Yeah.
sure it was a lot. But wow, with such learning. And I guess, yeah, what was that transition then from working in those kinds of justice spaces to maybe going into the healing space
Well,
network?
I had my own breakdown, honestly. It's like there's a moment like you're doing this work and you're doing 14, 18-hour days sometimes,
Oh my.
right? On average. Like you're at the office, there's intense mental focus. You are, or at least for me, it felt like you're almost always on because you're a bridge builder. There's a level of like sort of internal rigor of like you can't get this wrong. There are too many things at stake. And because a part of the work that I was doing is also bring capital to it, people look for the pedigree or the presentation. And so that sort of built an armor. Let me present the
Yes.
thing I need in order to secure the things that are needed for this to move forward.
Mhm.
But that's not how nature works, and that's not deeply human. So after about 20 or so years, burnout hits in a different way. And my meditation practice and yoga practice wasn't enough. Probably didn't spend enough time in it, truthfully. I would skip a practice if I had to get some work done,
Mhm.
which is a very Western idea, like work first. So I just feel brain fog and fatigue and moments where it's like, I don't know that I can get up a flight of stairs in the New York subway, like
Oh my.
shortness of breath. Like, so there were things happening to me physically that I couldn't explain. And
Mhm.
then going to the doctors and they put me on like several medications. And they're like, we don't know, like you're too young for all the things that you're showing and demonstrating. And, there was not a lot of language around like what burnout looks like when it starts to show up physically, or at least not the average doctor was talking about that. My life started to implode from there. And that's like something else had to happen. I got introduced to somatics because I no longer was working. There was like the forced slowdown. It was like, I know there is no computer in front of me. There is no meeting in Washington. There is no trip to Northern California, right? I'm off the road. I'm not doing any work. And I'm asking myself some pretty profound questions like, what do I actually want? I knew that I didn't want to do the work that I was doing in the way that I was doing it anymore. But I was like, I'm good at this. So what else do I do when that's the thing I'm good at? How do you start to rectify your life? How do I have joy? Because I didn't know what that meant anymore. And in that, after like several years, is when I became a coach.
Gosh. Oh, my heart. It's like, and it's really tough because you see so many people who are still in it, like totally, and they don't see any way out. And so it's really hard to see people who are in burnout and exhaustion and they don't, yeah, it's like, what do I actually enjoy doing with my life? What do I actually want to do? And it feels like there's no other option but to work, 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 because that's all we have
Mm-hmm.
in this capitalistic society. It's really, really tough. I also went through my own, I'm in the film world, in the film industry, so it's very similar of just like this constant productivity and achievement cycle and just like always having to be on and performing. And that, yeah, I just feel like I'm totally done with it. Like I can't continue. And how can we actually do the decolonization work and all of these different industries that people are just burning out left and right?
But it's hard for people, and some folks have a hard time giving it up. You can have the fear, right? There's the fear of like, what does this mean if You mean let go of the thing I know,
Mhm.
the thing that's worked. You want me to let that part of me go? The thing that helped me succeed? I don't know that we have enough demonstrations of people who do that. The internal work is
Yes.
really hard. Also, your community will change, right?
Right.
Because there are people who don't find that seductive anymore because they're still presenting. And they're like, you're asking me to tell the truth about something that I feel you might weaponize against me, right? Or the world might use it. But when you get into a place of a level of self love and sovereignty in that, then other like souls, like minds, like humans start to show up. But you have to know that that will happen, or you have to be surrounded by people as you're doing who are doing that as you're doing it so that you have a space to anchor into.
Totally. And it brings me back to the concept of love and it being a muscle to practice that we like I'm realizing that I don't think I ever actually experienced love in the way that I have now because of this vulnerability and coming without the armor anymore. Because now I'm surrounded by other people who are de-armoring too. And it's like, wow, what a totally different way of experiencing life and actually getting to feel intimacy in a way we couldn't because we had to be in that robot machine mode to survive
Mm-hmm.
so long for generations before us too. So it's takes a lot of courage.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And
Yes.
so I just want to say for anyone who's listening, be gentle with yourself and
Yes.
find someone that you can be with
Mm,
as you're doing this if you have a longing, don't ignore it. But if you can gently begin to make some of the shifts
mhm.
and find some folks that you trust in order to be vulnerable. And I'm not talking about the clinical vulnerability. It was like, let me tell you everything about myself. And there's still that layer of armor that you have there as a gauge as to whether or not this person comes closer or not. But someone that your body easily exhales around, allow that to be some of the spaces that you slowly begin to take some of those pieces off
Mhm.
and and do some living.
I would love to talk about your transition point of that. Okay, I'm jumping ship, and here comes this next world into the somatics world. And if you could talk a little bit about that point in your journey and the fear and having the faith, maybe the faith piece having to come in of I am safe to take this next step, even though I'm jumping into an abyss that I don't even know what that is.
So at the beginning, it was meeting Stacy and Richard, being on calls
Mhm.
with
Maybe if
them.
you could talk a little
Uh,
Rosie, I don't think in case people don't know about the
all
Strosians.
right. Richard, Josie Heckler, Stacey K. Haynes. Stacey was the director of methodology for the Strozzi Institute, and Richard is the founder of the Strozzi Institute. That's where I got my training. That's where I worked for years. It was interesting. It was in those early conversations with both of them that there was a level of honest transparency in their questions and in the way that they responded to me, like in their answers. And so that was a linchpin for me to like move forward. And I was like, I don't know all of this. I can actually be real and we're still connected, right? There is a level of trust that pulled me forward into somatics. And it also changed my relationships with other people around me because then I started to want that with every other person in my life. And not everyone was ready. There
No.
are definitely, there are definitely people who were like, I'm not getting on the phone with her. Like, no, I declined this call. And so you see who backs up from that and who leans forward. And so I would say, like, there's a majority of people who I work with who are amazing, brilliant folks who are helping and still shaping the world that we just aren't connecting in the same way because they're committed to a certain outcome, but they're also losing themselves.
Yeah, the whole thing of like alignment and who is actually in alignment with us at this different stage that we're in and being able to let go. It's not easy, but yeah. Okay, I would love to also talk about entrepreneurship. We're going in a lot of different buckets, but also from
Yeah.
going from, I think, were you ever self-employed before this? to going into self-employment. And yeah, again, that huge leap of faith to go into, okay, can I actually sustain myself in this new way of being?
Yeah, great question. I did watch other people do it. My mother had a catering business. I watched her do that. So there were examples for me, but I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. It didn't call to me. And I don't know that it necessarily called me, even though I'm doing it now. I think it became a necessity again, where it's just more like, here's what I have to offer. Entrepreneurship really is a relationship with yourself. It's like, who am I in this marketplace? What am I offering? Are there other people who believe you? Like, do you believe yourself?
Yeah,
And do
right.
others believe you?
Right.
Right? It is a growth path. It is a discipline path, right? Because you have to learn how to care for your business, care for yourself, understand your boundaries. There's a lot of call to faith. You have to be wise about where your investments go. And then when things get hard, which they will, there will be hard times.
Yep.
And so in those hard times, do you still have the faith that this is what the world wants of you? Or is it time to be inside of a system that allows you to just do the talent that you have? Because entrepreneurship isn't just about your talent or the actual service, it's also all of the structure.
So may I ask, like, for you, like, what do you feel is your soul calling that has allowed you to keep that faith of your entrepreneurship journey of like, yes, this is how I am of service to the world?
Sometimes it's really just calling a friend and going, am I losing my mind? The other part of it really is that my soul's calling is convening people. It's bringing people together. It's the thing that I've always loved. I'm a curious person. I love big stories. I love journeys. It's what drew me into studying things like Joseph Campbell, right? And looking at A Myth of a Thousand Faiths, like that epic log of like, how does this narrative work? And then what does that look like for women? And what does that look like for women of color? And what does that look like for Black women, right? So all of those things are things I think that we find when we're bringing folks together. That's my large soul calling.
Wow. Wow. And I ask, like, as a follow-up, like, what are your current ways that you're bringing people together, doing the convenings? It would be great to hear more about your current offerings and what you're doing to serve the world.
So currently I have a offering called La Mesa de Miel, which means honey table. And that is 15 people coming together over a culinary journey, which is about cultural fluency. You get to do a deep dive, kind of coach circle like, but you're doing it over food and you're allowed to embody ease and wonder. So create that intentional landscape for people to be able to meet the softest part of themselves. The other is what we're calling the Wealthy Practice Group. I might be changing the name of it, so don't get so y'all just like follow saltandhoneygroup.com for that. But really, it's about emotional wealth, bringing people together, practicing relationships, practicing love as a muscle, and doing it in some really fun ways, right? Because everything doesn't have to be clinical.
Wow. May I ask, like, what are some of those practices, or like, what are the ways of doing that?
In practicing love as a muscle.
Yes, with salt and honey.
We have drop-in circles like what's happening with you in real time. I do impart some somatic practices.
Hey.
One personal practice that I know you know is the love bath that we do, which is like bringing in your favorite scents, things from the garden, whether it's your rosemary or your basil, maybe some rose oil, adding that in, writing affirmations on your body with a watercolor and showing yourself to yourself how much you are loved and appreciated, and then allowing that to be washed away.
Oh, it's such a beautiful practice, really. And I feel like, yeah, a lot of people just never take the time to do that inner self-compassion. And it does so many wonders for ourselves and our healing. Wow, it's wonderful.
It's a great setup for the mirror work because mirror work can be really harsh in some aspects. But if you ground it in like, here's the thing I love about my knees, or here's the thing I love about my neck or my thighs,
Mm-hmm.
or that extra weight around my belly that really is a protective layer. Starting there and then moving into your mirror practice, like, what do I actually see here? Who am I? It's
Mm-hmm.
a great place to begin.
Gosh. And I guess like tying it back to the bigger justice work, like these kinds of very personal, intimate things, a lot of times people can think of them as, oh, they're not important, or maybe they're not as important as the direct action work that is needed for the crazy suffering that we're seeing in the world today. And I guess what would you say is the role of this kind of healing work and the self-love journey within the greater liberation work too?
So I love my direct action people, but I also know that they need support too. I don't know any warrior or soldier who doesn't need a soft place to land. We all need that.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are seeking to move forward without it, then what are we actually dreaming forward in the world? What do you, if you're only in the space of attack, only in the space of anger, then what are you seeding to come after that? Is there space for you to soften?
Mm.
Is there space for you to actually feel and receive love without critique? And then coming at the work, the direct action work.
Which allows you now to show up in love for others too, because you've done that for yourself, that rest. Super important. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot in the activism spaces, because I start to feel guilty as a Palestinian that I'm like, oh, I need to be out doing all the things and like going to all the protests and all of that. Am I using the world of healing as a scapegoat, or as a way for me not to have to face the real things that are affecting my people? And I see it sometimes. I fear that I'm coming from a place of privilege and that I'm actually just hiding away, versus like, yes, I'm being of service to my community and being able to offer these kinds of practices. But yeah, is it a thing of like escapism? Is my fear sometimes too.
So I think that there's a balance to it, but let me ask it in a different way. There are tons of hungry people in the world
Mm.
and children starving. Are you not going to have your next meal because that's
Right.
present? You can do them both. There's a place where it's like you take the actions that you can be in the. So I've been in the like larger rooms, and
Yeah.
I've been on the like in the streets, right, at the protest, and each of them has their place, but so does places of restoration and rest.
Mm.
And even in our mythical historic places, when we're talking about, at least in the States, the civil rights movement, and I'm sure other places in the world, when direct action was taking place, there were still people making meals. There was still a place where you loved the partner that you had.
Mm-hmm.
There was still the space that you came together in order to have some form of alleviation for
Mm-hmm.
your mind and for your heart. Otherwise, we would have people dying way too fast, way too quickly.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, it's something that's really important for us to like figure out the both, and that you can't have one without the other. Yeah, the whole thing of like putting your oxygen mask on before putting it on another person, that you have to put it on the other person too. You can't just give it to yourself, and you can't just
Mm-hmm.
focus on the self-sacrifice either. Okay, I think I'm gonna have one more question for you. I feel like there's an awakening happening for a lot of people of like, wow, actually, this whole conditioning and this way that I have been raised maybe isn't actually my truth and my actual calling. And for people who are interested in trying to go more into that journey of deprogramming, unlearning their conditioning, and wanting to do this transition, what would you suggest for them as a first step in this inner
Mm.
liberation journey?
Honestly, for me, travel has been one of those medicines. And
Okay.
I know that's a quite privileged thing to say. Sit in a room with people who are not like you and just listen. Read something that is uncommon to you and try not to argue with it for a moment. Just let it ride for a second. Listen to some music that isn't in your favorite genre, right? So do the thing that's uncanny. Do a new action. Do something just a little bit out of your ordinary.
And it's like the small things that allow you to start making the bigger, scarier changes in your
That's
life.
right. I actually, so like food is one of those anchor pieces that I think is really important. It carries a lot of stories, it carries culture, it tells you a lot about trade, it tells you the history of a people. And so for me, like when I not on a plane, it's getting out a cookbook or watching a YouTube video of someone making something that I have no basis of like foundational flavors
Mm.
and going like, I never thought to do anything like that. Coming to Northern Africa, the amount of like raisins and dates that I use isn't something that a Black American would do in terms of like foundational flavors. But in the unpacking of like what's in the environment, how that's like
Ah,
inside of a rice pilaf, I'm like, okay, I understand a little bit more here.
wow.
And it expands my ability to perceive.
I love that so much that like cooking and food can be the playroom for like being able to experiment with different ways of perspectives and perceiving. It reminds me of the yogic path too. Like as I recently did my yoga teacher training, and that we practice different things on the mat so that we can see what our body feels in certain ways, so that we can practice that in the outside world when we have to adapt or change and to become more flexible. Thank you so much, Lunas. Is there anything that else you'd like to share? Anything else? Reflections coming up? Um, yeah, that feel important to speak.
I love that you're doing this. I love the foundation of this podcast. And I see you out in the world doing such brilliant work with your art. Um, and I just feel really humbled and honored to be
Thank,
here with you.
thank you.
Thank you.
I feel the same. I feel the same. Really, you're an inspiration for us and for everyone who's going to see this. I'm sure it's really amazing, and I hope we'll definitely be putting all of your offerings in the show notes. And I hope, yes, that all the things have the greatest success because they're so needed for us to create this world together, for sure.
Oh,
Oh,
thank you so
thank
much.
you, Solunis. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Rooted in Love featuring my amazing coach and mentor, Solunis Nicole Bay. If you'd like to learn more about Solunis' transformational work through somatic coaching and salt and honey, you can find a list of useful links in the show notes. Feel free to share this episode with a friend, subscribe, and leave a rating. Follow along for future episodes on Instagram at cocos.sanctuary, which is also in the show notes. Until next time, please be sure to take intentional moments of pause to be able to stay rooted in love within yourselves and for the community around you.